All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Greg Gilligan. I'm very proud superintendent of schools here in North Andover. And we're here to talk about Facilities Master Plan 2 as a school project for the future as well as town projects. A couple of members of the school committee here tonight I'd like to introduce as chair of the school committee, Andrew McDevitt, and school committee member Pam Petrowski. Great to have. Yes, we're very lucky to have our state representatives here tonight. So awesome, I haven't seen them since the Senior Center, which was part of the 2013 Facilities Master Plan 1. So great, groundbreaking. We have the Director of Administrative Services from the town, Lori Burslaff, here tonight, as well as Dr. Jim Neely. Melissa Rodriguez, the town manager, won't be here tonight, but she's been at many of our meetings. And very thankful for Rick Gorman to host us here at the Youth Center. Rick is not here, but it's a terrific spot, and we're thrilled to have him. Many of you know that Facilities Master Plan 1 had several projects back in 2013. And so the Kittredge Gym, Town Hall, the school administrative building, DPW, the fire station behind the high school up there, the Brad Street and the Senior Center, which it was awesome to break ground on. Were long-term projects. They came to coming to fruition and closing that project out. And Facilities Master Plan 2 is an incredible opportunity for the town of North Andover that will impact this community for the next 30 to 50 years. The ability to renovate and build at our schools, at the Atkinson, at the Franklin, at the Kittredge, NAMS, and also two projects in there from the town side, Fire Station 2, with an addition, as well as here at the Youth Center, which is an amazing program and expanding programming space is a tremendous opportunity. So it does a few things. The ability to do this over time is it provides the space and equity that we need for 21st century learning. Simply put, our buildings up there in age. Places like Kittredge at 71 years old. Atkinson and Franklin not far behind. So, the ability to provide not only the way to impact class size, but to provide equitable and appropriate spaces for all kids to learn. Simply put, places for teachers to teach and the best places for students to learn. When these schools were designed, they weren't designed for English learners, they weren't designed for all the special education services, they weren't designed for speech and language and those things. And the ability to do this, have the appropriate spaces, but also build the capacity for future growth in this community, make a huge difference. So we're really thrilled to do it. We know that working together, anything's possible, and it's been tremendous. I meet, even prior to Facilities Master Plan 2, I meet weekly with the town manager. Every week we meet for a few hours, talking about budget, talking about planning, all of these different things. And I think we have proven when the town and the schools work together that we can accomplish amazing things. So I'm looking forward to tonight's presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Neely to start up here. So Dr. Neely.
Thank you, Dr. Gilligan. I apologize, I don't know what that sound is, but it doesn't sound like it's going to go away. So as Dr. Gilligan said, we have many projects for Phase 2 as we did for Phase 1. The way this started, I'll introduce Bill Peters and Al Brothers are here from MVG, the Mount Vernon Group. They're the consultants that have been working with us throughout this process, and as they said just earlier tonight, it's been about 2 years now, and we started on this. So there's been a lot of work already done, and one of the first things that happened was MVG came and did building assessments of schools and the town buildings that are in for this project. And what they found is that we have older schools that are in need of renovations. Mechanical systems need to be modernized. A lot of those are original from the 40s and 50s. They need to be brought up to modern code, including adding fire suppression sprinkler systems at 2 of our elementary schools. Atkinson and Franklin do not have those. They need to provide environments that are more conducive to learning, especially in the 21st century. And we want the ability to improve indoor air quality. One of the things that came apparent when COVID hit was the age of our systems, because while we had air quality testing done and it was up to standard, we wanted to improve it and maybe improve it without having to open windows in the winter. But we weren't able to because MERV filters, you can have anywhere from 1 up to 16, I think they even go higher than that. But MERV 13 was recommended at that point, but some of our systems would only take an 8 or 9. Or they would have burned out. So we didn't have that ability, and having modern systems would allow us to do that. The other big item with regards to these projects is making sure we have equity in all our schools. Now that happens at Bradstreet, and it happens at the middle school and the high school because all the students in town go to the same school. It doesn't happen at the elementary schools, and what we want to make sure, if you're a North Andover student, that whichever school you go to, there's going to be space to allow for growth. There's going to be space to impact class size, that we should have all of the appropriate support spaces. And every year, education seems to have something else added to the plate that it has to take care of, and it needs space to do so. All schools should have dedicated appropriate specialist spaces and should be able to provide environments that are conducive to learning. So the school projects include Kittredge, our oldest school, built in 1949. You can see this white roof are the 4 modular construction classrooms that were added in 2010. Now, modular construction is not the same as portable. Portables have a short shelf life. They're supposed to come in and then go fairly quickly. Modular construction just means it's built off-site and then put together on-site. So it lasts just as long as traditional, or it's supposed to last just as long as traditional construction. So 2010, they should last a long time. And then the green roof, most people realize, gets stopped at everything.
Get something defaulted. We shut this off. Okay, keep the mic in.
Okay, so anyone familiar with North Andover knows that that green roof is a Kittredge gym, built in 2013. The building assessment found that the exterior is in good to fair condition, the interior is in fair to poor condition, and it needs a lot of renovation to meet ADA requirements and other modern codes. We need to replace the steam boilers, the heating system with hot water. That would be much more effective and efficient. And the electrical is mostly original and needs to be replaced. If you look at, and all of this information is on our website. If you go to the school, well, you can go to either the town website or the school website. If you go to the school website and click on the school capacity heading that we have, you'll find the building assessments that were done by MPG. You'll find the meeting notes for all the meetings that have taken place. You'll find the survey results from the surveys that were done and the public forums that were done. And you'll find the final report that was generated for the school committee to make its final recommendation. But the assessments have all of these pictures and more to show the conditions of the existing buildings. I want to point out, and this always reminds me of this, these are, when you first come in the building, these stairs lead up to a teacher room on the left, a classroom straight ahead, and the nurse's office on the right. So what should immediately come to mind is, that's kind of difficult if I'm in a wheelchair or have access issues to get to the nurse's office. Right now, somebody would have to go outside, come through that classroom from an exterior door and then into the nurse's room. So there's ADA requirements that need to be met. But also, this reminds me of is the fact that Kittredge was our number 1 priority when we submitted for MSBA. We submitted all 4 school projects, the middle school, Kittredge, Franklin, and Atkinson. And in talks that Dr. Gillian and I had with MSBA, they suggested make sure you, and this is my phrase, but I'm kind of paraphrasing them, make sure you put your worst foot forward and make your top priority the one that has the best chance of getting approval. And that's what we did. So we put Kittredge, they came for a visit, seem to go well. They seem to identify with the needs that we have and thought they were legitimate. And usually in any given year, MSBA will make a decision in December, let the schools know if they're going to be invited in, and then if there's still some funds left, they'll notify schools or school districts in March. We've got notification from them that they're not making any decision for December. They're going to make all their decisions in March. So we're going to have to wait until then for that. So you can see ADA issues, the original equipment, whether it's the steam heat or the electrical, water infiltration occurring. There's the classroom you have to go in to get to the nurse's office. And the other thing we did is what we call the space analysis. And this really highlights where the needs exist, because people will say, oh, you have all rooms, you have classrooms, you have a nurse's office, you have art room, maybe you have a music room in the school. But the problem is that we have, in Kittredge in particular, we have converted closets into usable space that really shouldn't be for that use. And so you can see where we do have an art room, but the art room is actually a corridor that was closed off and created more a room, but it's still smaller than what MSB recommends for an art room. Music is on the card. In a year, it might be in a classroom, but then the next year it's needed for a classroom, so it gets kicked out. Reading is in a closet, and it should be 500 square feet, it's only 140. The caf and kitchen are much smaller than what is recommended, and that's why in kitchen we have to have 6 lunches instead of 3 or 4. The gym is great. It's the best part of the building. Library media center is about half of what it should be, and the support spaces and special education spaces and the nurse's office and OTPT are all much smaller than what they should be. Then we go on to Atkinson, built in 1964. I won't spend a lot of time on this. Most of the issues are the same with these schools. They have some roof failings that need to be addressed, and pretty much same conditions, ADA requirements and one code, the boilers, electrical. And as I said, Atkinson and Franklin are in need of a fire suppression system. And Atkinson has to have an elevator as well. It has a lift that doesn't meet code right now. And we would have to have an elevator. Same pictures show the roof either bubbling, cracking, or pooling. Non-ADA hardware and clearances, original equipment. There's the lift for getting from the first floor to second floor, but usually what we do is we have to move a class and have the student on the first floor instead of having to go up to the second floor. Same analysis I'll highlight because Atkinson originally was a middle school. The gym and the kitchen caf area are sufficient in size. But other areas, art, for instance, is half of what it should be, music is half of what it should be, the library media center, all the others are pretty much about half of what they should be. And then Franklin, very similar to Atkinson, needs the same things, including the fire suppression system, but Franklin's one floor, one level, so it doesn't need an elevator. Same picture showing the same issues and the same analysis. And again, with Franklin, what I'll point out here is the caf is pretty well sized, the library is nice, but their gym is completely inadequate. If you've ever been to Franklin, it's like 2 classrooms have been put together and they call it a gym. It's not even the size of half of this gym. So that's a big issue there for Franklin. Dr. Bill, do you want to take one of these?
Sure. There's water right in the home, Dr. Murphy did it. Anyway, North End Middle School was built in 1954 as North End High School with significant renovations. But as many folks know, this is our school with the highest class sizes. It has been for many years. They're packed every space possible in that building. Class size just a little bit under 24. Related arts, you're looking at 28, oftentimes doubled up. And this is just simply put, no space. So space is a real challenge there. Talking about the ability to have the appropriate spaces. Most of the exteriors and interior, good to fair condition, and a lot like the other schools. Just because we're grandfathered in for ADA compliance doesn't mean it's right. And we have some challenges there with stairs, some of the masonry, and again, just like you see at the Kittredge and the Franklin, the Atkinson, miscellaneous roof repairs and replacement required, and we know this is a top priority. So when Dr. Bailey talked about picking a priority for the Massachusetts School Building Authority, Kittredge, again, is our oldest school at 71 years old. Every single space in that building has been converted to be used for educational purposes or to be used. And if the Massachusetts School Building Authority provides the funding for a new Kittredge school, it's a big ticket item that takes the burden off the town in a lot of other ways with the reimbursement so that we can tackle some of these other projects. Enrollment projections. So, Dr. Bailey, this is your special. So, and you've been very accurate over the years.
Thanks. We were very sensitive in doing our enrollment projections, and Stan Lippert, who was on the subcommittee with myself and others, can attest to this, but we either took part, as Stan did, or certainly heard about the foster farms discussions that had taken place back in the early 2000s. And one of the problems that had happened with that project was that the enrollment projections were completely off. And basically what they had done is they had taken a short window of time, 3 or 4 years, and it showed growth. And they just projected that slope to continue and projected a much higher enrollment in 10 years from that time than what actually occurred. So what we did is we looked at 25 years and saw the peaks and the valleys that occur, but also saw a pretty steady line that occurs over time. And we had 2 consultants come in and do enrollment projections. They had a high and a low in their projections, and we kind of took the middle of that. The middle of that happened to be what the slope shows. So both Wegman and TBA came in and did their projections, and those are based on births, developments, trends that have occurred. They take pretty much everything that you can think of into account when they do these projections. And so here it is graphically. You can see this point right here, where it shows a 3-year growth, is what they focused on for those projections for foster farms. But then you can see what happened. It actually went down and just stayed pretty steady for the next few years. And here you're seeing what we think is the impact of COVID, and then the projections going out, and you can see you can't really make it out too well here, but there's a dotted line right here, a straight line that shows a steady growth of 35 students per year. That's what it's been traditionally, and that's what we anticipate based on what's happening in our town to continue, and that's what we're planning for. So the recommendation came from a lot of public input. We did surveys for both the community and staff. We did public forums, and it was clear what the community wanted. We asked a question about grade distribution, and there were options that included splitting up the middle school into lower and upper middle school, splitting up elementary into lower and upper elementary. All the different options we could think of were considered, but the community definitely prefers the current model, not surprisingly. And they also want to maintain neighborhood schools, again, not surprisingly. And they want to make sure that when we are doing these projects, we're addressing the following issues: equity, supplying support spaces, supplying 21st century learning spaces, impacting class size, and accounting for enrollment growth. And we knew going in, we need to remove the portables because they went into the 80s, they've outlived their useful life, and it's time for them to go. But at the same time, always being fiscally responsible. So that was the overall recommendation. And what that means graphically is all of our schools need ADA compliance and code compliance, remove any portables that are there. We need to add classrooms to impact class size and future growth, but we also need to add support spaces now, or as soon as we can, while we're renovating the exterior and updating the systems. Specifically, our recommendation includes Kittredge as a new school. It's just too old, and if you've ever been there, the footprint just isn't conducive to trying to add on. And then site-specific also, we talked about the Franklin Gym, the middle school needing science labs, the Atkinson elevator, ABECC, we didn't mention that one, but it's fairly new. One of the things that we shortchanged ourselves on at the ABECC is the size of the gym. It's just not sufficient for that school, so we would address that with these projects as well. And then Atkinson and Franklin, we would put in a fire suppression system that needs to go in there. So for Kittredge, build a new school on the same site, utilize the existing gym and 4 existing classrooms attached to the gym. And it could look something like this. MVG did these designs for us, where I'm highlighting is where the existing school is right now. And this is where I'm going to ask, well, I'll do it on the next one, I think it's better. So here's the existing gym and the classrooms, and they would build around that, and it would be a 450 student facility rather than what we have there now is 240 at the most. So then for Atkinson, again, we would get rid of the portables, renovate interior and exterior, upgrade the systems, install fire suppression, install an elevator, add classrooms and support spaces. I'm going to ask, Al's going to speak to it. Al to come up at this time. This is where we usually have MVG come up. Because one of the questions that we get a lot is, how do you do the school projects with students in the building without impacting either their safety or their education? And I think that seeing it visually and having Al speak to it is a good way to handle this question. So Al, I'm going to speak up.
Thank you, Jim. Basically what we try to do is work with the district to determine how we would build either a new school or renovation or an addition. In this particular case, what you see is that the Atkinson School, the first thing you really do is to make sure the safety of the students, teachers, and parents are the first priority. The second piece is educational delivery. Make sure that happens while construction is happening. So in this case, it's a pretty straightforward design. So what you would do is you would build a portion of the building, which is the new addition, which you would see here in brown. That's under construction, completely separate from a contractor's perspective, fenced off. They have their own independent access. Students, parents, and teachers have the remaining part of the site and use that during that time period. When that phase is over, in this particular case, it would take about 8 to a year. They would then complete that. Students move into that section of the school and the administration, and then we would take over portions of the renovation to renovate portions of the school while that's being done. In this case, we could probably do it in 3 phases. It would probably be a 30-month schedule, but each school is a little different depending on the configuration and size, but that's the general premise as to how to do it. Completely separate, complete separation in terms of building, site, make sure you have good air quality while the students are there, you mitigate sound during the day, have weekly, monthly meetings with construction people and also the district to make sure that any issues that are arising during construction, they can be dealt with immediately. So that's basically how we achieve that.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that? So we're going to put students, while we're doing construction, in half the space, basically. Does that mean we're going to double the class size temporarily while we're doing construction? That wing, the new wing, is where the existing wing now is. In Atkins, right?
The blue is the existing. The new construction is here. So this would be constructed.
Okay, where's the gym? The old gym?
This is Atkinson. This is
I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
And so this would be.
My bad.
No, it's okay.
My bad.
So, that's okay, so the concept is
Brain
rebuild
freeze.
this,
Brain freeze. Yeah, no, I got it.
then move some of these students
I got
here,
it.
and then do it in three
Sorry,
phases.
sorry.
That's okay.
My bad. I'm looking at this and thinking Franklin. My bad.
And I would just add, these folks are, they've done hundreds of projects. And so as superintendent of the schools, the number one priority is the safety of our student staff and their families. And then second is doing nothing that would impede the ability to deliver an excellent education during this. So they're the top priorities, they have to be the priorities. And they have a lot of experience with it. The nice thing is, on something like the Kittredge, it's a new build. That gives you the ability to probably be on a quicker schedule. A lot like when they did Thompson and North End High School. For example, North End High School was built in 2004. They were in the old high school where the football field and soccer fields are, now with the press box. That's where the old North End High School was. And they were there until February, 3 days prior to break, February vacation. And they used 3 professional development days plus the week of February vacation and moved into the new school on top. Then they tore down that old building and eventually create the fields. So, the ability to do that is really terrific. And then it's a little more, different scenarios when you're doing an addition. They have a lot of experience with it, and again, it's the safety and education that are top priorities.
So here's Franklin, just like Atkinson, except that we would build a new gym for Franklin. And so what Stan was getting at is this actually might require an extra phase than Atkinson, because you might do the new area, and then move out of one section in that, and then do 1 or 2 sections. So it just might be an extra phase in order to make it happen, but you can still do it similarly. Is where the new gym would go, and then the addition would be in the back. The nice thing about the designs is they have very little impact on the existing site. So the playground is here still. In Atkinson, it had the green where the portables were, and it doesn't impact the green space that the students use. So that's one good thing about the designs that we have. And in the middle school, we would add 10 to 15 classroom/science labs, 4 to 8 support spaces, and renovate the building. This one causes a lot of angst because people hate to see the courtyard get filled up instead of being green space. We've had a few people look at this, including MPG. Their initial assessment is that the courtyard makes the most sense for the flow of the building and what's available for space. But until you get into the design, that's when the final decision will be made. It could turn out that the front of the building or coming off the cafeteria makes more sense once they get into it, but those who have looked at it have suggested that the courtyard makes the most sense. You could put the rooms in there and still have open access to sunlight, natural light into the rooms.
Will that be 2 stories?
Correct. But it's already active, it's already elevated, it's already 2 floors. And then as I mentioned, the ABECC, we would probably expand while we're there, expand the entrance area for the administration, the support space there, but add the gym, that would be the main thing. So you can see we'd add a little here, but the gym would be the main part of that project. And it would go on the existing preschool playground, which would then not have to go too far. We would just move over next to the kindergarten playground. And then the other projects, right across the street, we're here right now. So right across the street is fire station number 2. It would be an extra bay that's needed, and then an updating of their sleeping quarters and support spaces. They talk about the fact that we have both men and women, and the ability to provide separate facilities, so this would allow us to do that. And then for here, the youth center, there's some flex space that they have propose, as they continue to grow, this program's been extremely successful, and as they continue to grow, they need some space, and they have, I was hoping Rick was going to be here, but he wasn't able to make it tonight. He would have explained exactly what it is, but it's space that they've needed for a while now, and this is giving me the opportunity to address that as well. So, going forward, we are meeting as the Facilities Master Plan 2 working group. It includes Lori, who's here tonight. Steve Foster is our facilities manager. Paul Hutchins is our
Chief Building Inspector.
chief building inspector. I have a mental block about this time for whatever reason. I know who Jim Bailey is. Lynn Savage is the town finance director, and Jim Stanford is the DPW director. So we're meeting, we've already met a few times, and we'll continue to meet to work on the next phase of what we'll be presenting, which will be the timeline and the funding plan. So this is the last of our fall public forums. All of them have been graciously taped by Cam and are available on the website. And then coming out of the holidays, we'll have more to go over the finance and plan and timeline. So I've talked about most of this. The school committee, the subcommittee made a recommendation to the school committee, which made its final recommendation to the Facilities Master Plan 2 working group in September. We've been meeting and we'll continue to meet beyond December. These project forums have been taking place from October till today. And then we'll continue to meet right up and through March. And we'll continue some more public education support initiatives, which will include using CAM, some messaging, flyers, whatever we think will help educate the public, including some more public forums, specifically on the funding plan. Working our way to town meeting approval in May of 22. I think it's the 16th this year for town meeting. Which will, in all likelihood, be the approval of design of either the first two projects, with construction following that in the years going out. And then, depending on the timeline, one of the things we've been letting people know is when the phase 1 for the facility master plan started, we were pretty consistent: design, construction, and design of the next project, and then the following year, design and construction. There's going to be some breaks in this plan. It's got to get stretched out because we're going to try to fund this as much as possible through capital funding that we have and other means without having to do an override or a debt exclusion. So that just pushes things out a little bit, but it makes it much more likely that these are going to happen. And so subsequent town meetings will have design and construction votes. Some of the things that have come up so far in these forums: make sure the renovation addresses 21st century technology needs, not just building needs, but one of the things we've seen in COVID, you've got to make sure you've got the infrastructure to accommodate something happening like COVID, so that you can still provide education even if it's not in the building. But now that we are, and one of the things that came out of COVID is some good things, including the fact that all of our students have a device now. And so teachers are able to incorporate that into the classroom, and you want to make sure you can allow them to access that technology. We were asked to make sure that we continue to pursue partnering possibilities with the Stevens Library, which we certainly will. Make sure the design phase addresses 21st century outdoor space needs, including technology. So another thing that we've seen is the willingness of teachers to get their students outside. We put the tents up, and they have been utilized extensively. But maybe there are things that we can build into the design of these buildings and the site that will help with the education. How can we make sure our children will be impacted by these projects? Well, one of the first things that we'll do is the middle school is pretty high up in the order because that will impact the most students. One, if they're in elementary, they're going to the middle school, but also everybody goes to the middle school, so it will impact the most students. And then when will we have the financial plan and timeline? We will have that coming out of the holidays as we meet and finalize this. It's getting close to being finalized, so we'll be ready. One thing that will happen though is we were hopeful that one, MSBA would be making their decision in December and that it would be favorable for us. That's not going to be the case because they're not making any decision until March. So that means coming out of the holidays, we'll have to present Plan A and Plan B. So Plan A being if we're accepted into the MSBA program, this is what it's going to look like. And Plan B, if we're not, this is what it will look like. Any questions?
Town meeting
17th? Okay, May 17th, town meeting. Thank you. Stan Levin.
So you have up there about education, right? Educating the voting populace, right?
Yes.
I'm a little concerned, having been to a few of these meetings, that may be difficult to get people to pay attention until we get to town meeting, and then they're gonna be like, what the heck? You didn't tell me you were gonna spend, picking up 50 million, 20 million, 80, so, we've tried this before on a number of different occasions and struggled every single time. What's gonna be different this time? How are we gonna get the select? And I would say the only successful time in my memory where something like this was done in our town is when we had the override in 2007, where it was just like a monumental effort that people turned out for to really put the press on it. That was like an election campaign. It was like someone running for office, that level of energy that went into the effort. So, I'm okay with this. I'm just worried we're going to get to town meeting. Everybody's going to be like, really? You want how much? What? What?
We did do it with the first master plan.
What's that?
We did it with the first master plan. That was very successful. So I think we have a track record.
I hope so.
So it's certainly a selling point, right, in phase 2 that we were successful with phase 1. But Stan's right. We are struggling with this question because we see the turnout for these. One of the mantras that we had as a subcommittee was to try to get to town meeting and not have anybody say, have you thought about this? Because we have, right? We put it out there as much as possible, encourage people to ask questions, responded to those questions and any suggestions that they had, knowing full well that no matter how much we did that, we're going to have somebody stand up and say, what about this? But going back to what Stan's asking, we are very aware of that, and we're going to do everything we can to get the word out. We're going to use professional help if we can. We're going to make every effort to make sure that the word, all the information's out there, it's just directing people to it, making them aware of it, and answering any questions that come up. So we're going to pull the full court press, no pun intended, or actually that was intended, in order to do it. Bill?
So my follow-up question is, if we go with Plan A, which is MSB funding for pictures, included that exclusion override question?
We don't, well, so far it doesn't look like it would for that project, but we don't know for sure yet. We'll know that, like I said, coming out of the holidays, we'll have that information.
I've always assumed that the MSBA required a certain funding commitment by us if they're going to give us the money. So if that's a $40 million project and they're going to pay 40%, that means we got to come up with $25 or $30 million.
Correct.
And I don't know that that's certainly not free cash for us, right? Might be borrowed, but to have it right up front sounds like that.
Right. There's a few factors, and Melissa handles this one very well, but the high school debt is falling off around that same time, so it all comes into play, and I don't think it's until a couple of projects in that we have to start talking about not being able to fund it with what we have.
Yeah, and it all has to do with the timing.
Yep.
If they give us the money and they say, okay, are you going to start because then they run the schedule, then we can't wait for that debt to fall off. We got to get the money.
Yeah, I think the critical part is the process, right, the timeline. So we had tremendous participation in those surveys with student, staff, and families last spring. And simply put, this was an opportunity, so no one thinks that there wasn't a stone unturned, but we have to make the community aware of what the needs are. And now, coming out of, the Facilities Master Plan 2 group, we'll come up with an order and a financing plan, and that's what we're really gonna have to produce, and let the community know exactly what that is when that comes out. But I did want to point out, in the Massachusetts School Building Authority, because that plays a role, Plan A and Plan B. 58 schools applied to be as part of a core program, and so we did a conference call. I guess it used to probably be in person, it was through Zoom, but then they came out and did a senior site study with architects, engineers, their folks. So we went from 58 to 20. So now we're in the mix for 20. And they make all of those decisions in March. And that's one of the clarifying questions I asked them last week is, are you going to make some decisions, between December and March? And, the response that I got from the MSBA was they're making all the decisions in March. So it's not like they're going to make some over the course of that time. But to be in the 20 is certainly encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we need to understand as a town is we have kind of underinvested in schools, probably historically, and I was wondering if, the experts know of, how much in capital should a town or community be putting into construction, kind of per year, per student, kind of over the long term, and what's our deficit? Because we are, I think one thing that has to be clear is, we're digging ourselves out of a hole. If we have a lot of schools that are built in the 50s and 60s, that's an issue. And I don't know if there's some way to frame that in terms of, where we should be and where we are now, and how we're gonna get to that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's a couple of things. This is not a building condition issue. It's an age and it's a space issue. We don't have enough space for all that we need our schools to have, and they're just old and systems are worn out. One of the things that MSBA looks at when they come to a visit is how well you maintain your buildings. What kind of commitment are you making? Are we going to give you money and then it's just going to fall apart because you don't maintain it? And they came to the middle school 4 years ago, and they've come to Kittredge, and both times they've commented that we're doing a good job maintaining. So I personally struggle every year with how much money do we need to put into maintenance. And I can tell you that what has made the difference in North Andover for my time here has been the facilities department was created to manage both town and school, and funds have been dedicated to doing that. And when I look at each year for the capital requests, and I look at the conditions with Steve Foster, our manager for facilities, we're in very good shape. We've been doing a good job of maintaining. He did an excellent job of identifying issues that need to be addressed. So from that regard, we'll never, and I don't know any school department that would have what the experts recommend for capital investment. It's just way too much. But we have been giving enough to have our buildings in very good shape.
Yeah, I guess it's a slightly different question. Just I agree on the maintenance front, 100%. I think it's a slightly different question just in terms of construction, our peer towns, how much have they spent in the last, if we pick a number, 30 years. If we look at towns in our peer group, how much have they spent on, new construction and renovations, capital, big capital projects, not sort of repairs over the past 30 years, and where do we stack up? I think that might be useful to say hey, this is where we are, and this is where our, peer communities are when we're looking at this.
Yeah, it's a pretty high level conversation. We have been pretty good about, we set the debt at, we don't want to be more than 5%, right? And we've been doing a very good job of not exceeding that and actually being under that. So that kind of plays into how much as a community, it's not always relative to other communities, it's where do you want to be and how much are you putting back into your town. So that's kind of a high level discussion, like finance committee and
In answer to Bill's question though, like in the late 90s and early 2000s, we built 3 new schools, significant new schools. And we renovated the middle school, significantly renovated the middle school. So we spent a ton of money on schools 20 years ago. Now, maybe it's a 20-year cycle. Maybe that's what we're looking at. But I look at, I don't know about what our peer towns are, but I look at Hanover, and they're always moaning about their high school, that they haven't done anything with for forever. It needs all kinds of help. So if they're an example, you know, they built a couple of elementary schools, but they haven't done anything that's as significant as what we've done in the last 20 years. So.
And I think another good indicator is, other than Kittredge, when they were talking about foster farms, we haven't been waiting a long time for, you know, it's like you identify it and then it goes years. This is happening fairly quickly in the process that they've been identified and we're talking about a plan to address it. I think that's a pretty good indicator as well.
Yeah, I'd say, Jim, one of the things I like about the presentation is the square footage deficit versus the recommendations. I think that's really concrete, you know, in terms of what is cost for the community. You can look at that overall number, but different communities get different, if they're doing the MSBA, they get different amounts of reimbursement, depending on community socioeconomic status. But I think that's a really good question, and something to think about and look at. For this one. Other questions? Using my skillful teacher training for wait time. Questions going once? Going twice? Folks, really, thank you for coming out tonight. Very good group. A little bit of a buzz from one of the boxes up there. When we got there was no buzz when we tested out the mic, and just happened, so it came us. But there's plenty of YouTube videos of all these different visits, presentations, and again, folks sometimes say, you know, when's the best time to plant a tree? It was probably 20 years ago. When's the second best time? It's today. And literally, this will impact our community for the next 50 years. And it's significant and impactful. And I, as superintendent, am appreciative of all of the different folks working together on complex moving parts. So thank you so much, and thanks for coming along.
I'm not disagreeing.